Hi, welcome to Genealogy Coffee Break, brought to you by us, the genealogy librarians at the Center for Jewish History. My name is Moria Amit, and I'm here with my colleague J.D. Arden and other library staff, who will also be fielding your questions. To continue our exploration of the genealogy of marginalized and underrepresented groups, today we'll show you how to find your elusive female ancestors in the genealogical paper trail. During today's episode, feel free to send us your questions via the comments box and we'll answer them live. If we don't get to your question or you're not watching live, you can always email your questions to us at gi@cjh.org. If you have friends or family who are interested in watching this program, please share it with them. Who will find this program worthwhile? This series is intended for a general audience. Beginners or advanced researchers are welcome. You don't need to be Jewish to find our research tips useful. We focus on free online resources that can be accessed from home. Please write to us at gi@cjh.org to ask about the free Zoom workshops that we provide to groups from synagogues, senior centers, and other nonprofit organizations, or suggest a topic for a future program. Today, I will explain the three most common brick walls people face when researching their female ancestors: maiden names, record-keeping bias, and exclusion from public life. I will also talk about my recommendations for how you can get past each of these and start to build a fuller picture of the lives of the women in your family's past. For centuries, in much of the Western world, the practice of women replacing their surname with their husband's surname upon marriage has effectively severed their ties to their own biological families. In this example, I will demonstrate how easy it is for families to lose track of their female ancestors' lineages over time. Let's pretend for a moment that Rachel Hirsch is your grandmother. Hirsch, of course, is her married name that she adopted upon marrying your grandfather, Max Hirsch. Chances are pretty good that you or a member of your immediate family knows that her maiden name was Stern, and even that she was the daughter of Seymour Stern. Now let's pretend Rachel Hirsch is your great-great-grandmother. She was born in the late 1800s, and there's no one alive today who remembers her. It's quite possible that you and your family only know her as Rachel, wife of Max Hirsch. Unlike Rachel's brother David, who will forever be tied to his father and male ancestors through the Stern surname, Rachel's only connection is to her husband's ancestry. Learning a woman's maiden name is a crucial first step for the modern researcher trying to find documents that shed light on a woman's early life or that trace her ancestry back to previous generations. Ironically, the very documents which mark the occasion on which women were typically stripped of their maiden names are the ones that hold the greatest potential as a source of those names. Of course, I'm referring to a woman's marriage records. Depending on the place, time, and religious affiliation of the wedding, any number of records may have been created to show the couple's intent to marry, such as newspaper announcements, licenses, and applications, and to document the actual wedding, such as marriage contracts, or the ketubah in Jewish tradition, registers, and certificates. However, not all historical marriage records are equally likely to survive to the present day. Religious marriage contracts, with the exception of those that have been passed down within families, have scarcely survived. On the other hand, civil marriage registers have been maintained for local clerks for centuries and are likely to remain in the archive or registrar's office of the town in which they were created. The birth records of a woman's children are the second best source for her maiden name because the person who supplied that information is typically the woman herself. A woman's death records, although they often contain her maiden name, should be used with caution. Think about whether the woman's closest surviving relatives are likely to have accurately recalled her maiden name. On this slide, you'll see an example of a marriage record, typical of New York City marriage certificates from the early 1900s. And as you can see near the top of the page, the wife's or the bride's name includes her maiden name. On the right-hand side, there's a birth register from New Marlborough, Massachusetts in 1910. And although there's only a little bit of information provided about each of the children born, that information does include the maiden name of the child's mother in the right-hand column. If you can't locate records of the woman's marriage or her children's births, or those particular records don't contain a maiden name, don't give up there. There are a number of alternative sources to pursue. First, if your female ancestor was already married when she emigrated to the United States, check her and her husband's immigration records. They may have identified the woman's father or one of her brothers, all of whom shared her maiden name, as their closest living relative in their native country or as the relative who they were joining in the US. Second, review your female ancestor's US federal and state census records. Multi-generational extended family households were much more common in the 19th and early 20th centuries than they are today. Well into your ancestor's married life, you may find one of her unmarried siblings or one of her widowed parents living in her household. Lastly, search for your female ancestor in the local newspapers of the places she lived as a married woman. Obituaries in particular tend to provide the names of a woman's surviving relatives, which may include her brothers or unmarried sisters. In this particular article, the renowned philanthropist Adele Rosenwald Levy, despite being identified only as Mrs. David Levy, is described as the daughter of Julius Rosenwald. So we do discover her maiden name. Another challenge that genealogists face in finding information about their female ancestors is due to a record-keeping bias that cuts across national and ethnic boundaries as well as time periods. Until the last 50 to 100 years, many government endeavors to list and describe the residents of a particular location only deemed it worthwhile to include the head of each household, which was in most cases the eldest man in a particular family. In historical directories, for example, the few women you will typically find were either widows or business owners, which were a rarity for the time. While U.S. Census records have listed each person in every household, including women, since 1850, other governments that have undertaken censuses specifically for the purposes of military conscription or taxation have not been so inclusive. Similarly, throughout much of modern history, governments around the world only granted citizenship and international travel permits, such as passports and visas, to a male head of household. Even in the US, immigrant women were not authorized to apply for citizenship independently until 1922. So what can you do if you are unable to find your female ancestor in these types of records? Try searching for the records of her father in her childhood years or her husband in her adult years. In this example, we see Jacob Levine's petition for naturalization, the second step in the process to becoming a US citizen. While Jacob's wife, Rose, did not have the opportunity to apply in her own right, Jacob's petition does include some valuable information about his wife, such as her date and country of birth. Similarly, if you want to trace where a woman lived over the course of her life, try searching directories for her father during the years of her childhood, and then for her husband during the years of her adult life. Although we can't undo the omissions of the past, we can find alternate paths to get at the information we are seeking. The third obstacle to finding records of our female ancestors is the fact that until the last 50 to 100 years or so, women worldwide were barred or restricted from participating in many spheres of public life, including the following activities that tend to produce records: owning property and businesses, voting or holding a government office, attending a secondary school, college, or professional school, joining a guild, union, or professional organization, enlisting in the military, and holding a leadership role in most religious, commercial, and nonprofit institutions. That being said, our female ancestors found many ways to participate in public life by carving out their own female-friendly realms. These include girls' schools and women's colleges, or vocational schools, girls' orphanages and women's group homes, female-dominated professions like nursing and teaching, and trades like the garment industry, and women's charities, cultural and political organizations, unions, and religious societies in which women were found that they were better able to express themselves freely and take on leadership roles. So where can you find records of a particular women's organization? If the organization still exists, then my number one recommendation is to contact them to learn where their historical records are currently held. Otherwise, for government or secular organizations, contact or visit the public library and archives in the places where your female ancestors lived. And for religious organizations, contact or visit the archives of the local or national branch of the religion in which your female ancestors participated. Now, this gets a little bit tricky for Jewish women's organizations for two reasons. First, in places where their Jewish communities were largely wiped out, records of those women's organizations within those Jewish communities have been scattered across the globe, especially to the US and Israel. And there are, of course, many countries today where there's not a singular Jewish authority. That includes the US as a prime example. So in that case, for records of Jewish women's organizations, we need to turn to specific repositories of Jewish communal and organizational records, such as the Center for Jewish History in New York, where I'm based. If you have a particular organization in mind, please search our catalog for that organization's name or that type of organization in our online catalog, search.cjh.org. And here on this slide, I've just created a list of some selected sources that we have on female-friendly Jewish realms, such as the National Council of Jewish Women, Hadassah, the Jewish Colonization Association, which included the records of a number of girls' schools in Eastern Europe, the Jewish Child Care Association of New York, which includes the records of the Friendly Home for Girls and Girls Club residents, and women's groups or societies within dozens of New York City Landsmannschaft and synagogues. This of course, is not an exhaustive list. If you have questions or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, you may write to us now via the comments box, or later by emailing us at gi@cjh.org. For updates on this and other Center for Jewish History programs, please join our email list at bit.ly/CJHE-news. If you enjoyed this program, we hope you will consider making a donation at cjh.org/donate now. Your donations allow us to put on programs like this while the center is closed. Thank you for watching and participating. We look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday for the next episode of Genealogy Coffee Break. Until then, stay safe and be well.